The Mongols and the samurai, two warrior cultures whose names have resonated through history for centuries. The Mongols, notorious for their brutal conquests and unstoppable war machine, and the samurai, legendary for their honor, discipline, and the mystique of their Bushido code. At first glance, these two seem worlds apart. One ruled by ruthless efficiency and overwhelming numbers, the other by a strict code of conduct and an almost spiritual connection to battle. But what happened when these two forces met in the 13th century? Well, let's take a look at one of the most thrilling and dramatic showdowns between two of the fiercest warrior nations in history. In the late 1200s, the Mongol Empire was one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. It stretched across Asia, Europe, and even into parts of the Middle East. Under the leadership of Kublai Khan, the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, the Mongols had conquered vast swaths of land, sweeping through the Song Dynasty in China and invading Korea. Kublai's eyes, however, were set on Japan. In 1268, Kublai Khan sent a diplomatic mission to Japan with an offer of trade relations, but with a hidden demand. Japan must recognize Mongol supremacy and pay tribute. To Kublai Khan, Japan was another prize to be claimed, just like the kingdoms they had already conquered. But the Japanese weren't so easily impressed. The Kamakura shogunate, led by Hojo Tokumyin, dismissed the Mongol message as nothing more than a gesture that didn't deserve a response. Tokumyin, secure in his belief that Japan could defend itself, took no action. This wasn't the first time the Mongols had tried to break into the islands of Japan, and certainly, it would not be the last. However, in 1274, the Mongols grew tired of waiting. They sent another diplomatic mission, and this time, it wasn't so polite. It was downright aggressive, insulting even. The letter demanded that Japan bow to Mongol rule, stating that all under the light of the sun and the moon are his subjects, and that the Japanese, stupid little barbarians, should submit or face the wrath of the Mongol Empire. Tokumyin, unsurprisingly, ignored this message as well, but now the die had been cast. In 1274, Kublai Khan launched his first invasion of Japan. He sent a massive armada of about 900 ships, carrying an estimated 40,000 soldiers. These were not just Mongols, though. Kublai had already conquered China and Korea, so the invading forces were a mix of Mongol cavalry, Chinese infantry, and Korean sailors. They landed on the Japanese islands of Tsushima and Iki, quickly overwhelming the small local populations. The invaders then set their sights on Hakata Bay, located on the island of Kyushu. Now, Japan's samurai were not unprepared for battle, but they were caught off guard by the Mongols' tactics. You see, samurai warriors were used to fighting according to a strict code of conduct. Bushido, the way of the warrior, dictated that when armies met on the battlefield, one soldier from each side would step out and engage in single combat. It was considered a noble practice and a way to test individual skill and bravery. But the Mongols didn't fight that way. Instead, they attacked in tightly coordinated units, using cavalry to encircle their opponents and infantry to overwhelm them. When a samurai would step out to challenge a Mongol, he was quickly met with a hail of arrows from the Mongols' long-range archers. It was a disorienting and brutal way to fight, and the samurai were unprepared for such tactics. And the Mongols weren't just more numerous, they also had a technological advantage. Gunpowder had already been incorporated into Mongol warfare, and they employed a variety of devastating weapons, including catapults that could hurl massive, flaming projectiles into the ranks of the enemy. The Mongols also used poison-tipped arrows, and their longbows were much more powerful than the shorter bows the samurai used, giving them a significant range advantage. But despite these overwhelming advantages, the samurai still managed to put up a fierce fight. The Japanese samurai, led by their commander Takazuki Tsunaga, fought bravely, but were outnumbered and outclassed in terms of firepower and tactics. As the Mongols pushed deeper into the Japanese defenses, the samurai were forced to retreat to the hills surrounding Hakata Bay. But the Mongols were not prepared for what would happen next. As the battle raged on, a massive storm began to sweep across the coast. The winds grew stronger, and the seas became more tumultuous. The Mongols, worried that their ships might be driven ashore, began to retreat into open water. And that's when it happened. A massive typhoon, a powerful force of nature, struck the Mongol fleet. The storm was so intense that it capsized over a third of the Mongol ships, sending them to the bottom of the Pacific. Some 13,000 Mongol soldiers perished in the storm. The Japanese, who had already begun to regroup after their retreat, saw this as a divine intervention, a blessing from the gods themselves. They called it the kamikaze, or the divine wind, and the legend was born. The Mongols were forced to withdraw, humiliated and defeated not by the samurai, but by the wrath of nature. This event, this supernatural event, was immortalized in Japanese history and became a defining moment for the samurai. However, this wasn't the end of the story. Kublai Khan wasn't one to give up so easily. After the storm, there was a period of calm. The Mongols regrouped, but Japan was far from secure. The Japanese had used the time to bolster their defenses, constructing an enormous 12-mile-long wall around Hakata Bay. They knew that another invasion was only a matter of time, and they were determined to be ready. In the meantime, Kublai Khan tried once more to negotiate, sending envoys to Japan in 1281. But once again, they were turned away, the Japanese shogun dismissing the Mongol emissaries with disdain. In response, Kublai Khan set his invasion plans into motion. This time, he wasn't taking any chances. He gathered an even larger fleet, upwards of 4,000 ships, and an army that may have numbered up to 140,000 soldiers. The Japanese were outnumbered, with only 40,000 samurai at their disposal. But they had learned from the first invasion. They had prepared their defenses and built stronger fortifications. When the Mongols arrived in Hakata Bay, they were initially unable to breach the Japanese defenses. The 12-mile-long wall around the bay proved to be a formidable obstacle. However, the Mongols were not deterred. They attacked relentlessly, despite being unable to break through the defenses. As the battle wore on, the samurai, using their superior knowledge of the land and the environment, began to launch raids on the Mongol ships. Samurai warriors would stealthily approach in small boats under the cover of night and set fire to the Mongol fleet. The flames wreaked havoc on the Mongol ships, but still, the Mongols pressed on, confident that their reinforcements would turn the tide. But then, once again, nature intervened. Just as the Mongol reinforcements arrived, and it seemed like the samurai were on the brink of defeat, another typhoon struck. This storm was even more powerful than the first. It destroyed over half of the Mongol fleet, leaving only a few hundred ships remaining. The storm swept across the bay, and once again, the Mongol forces were devastated by nature's fury. The remaining Mongol soldiers that managed to reach the shore were quickly overwhelmed by the samurai, who, emboldened by their belief in divine protection, fought with renewed strength. Once again, the Mongols were forced to retreat, their fleet destroyed, and their invasion plans in ruins. The Japanese had won. Against overwhelming odds, they had successfully repelled one of the most powerful forces in the world. The victory was seen as a sign from the gods, and the kamikaze, divine winds, became a part of Japan's national consciousness, forever woven into their military and cultural identity. The Mongol defeat in Japan marked the end of Kublai Khan's dreams of conquering the islands. The defeat also signaled the decline of the Mongol Empire's ambitions. Over the next century, the Mongol Empire began to fragment and splinter, its vast territories slowly breaking apart. For the samurai, however, the victory over the Mongols was a defining moment in their history. The battle cemented their place as the ultimate warriors of Japan, and the story of the kamikaze winds became part of their rich cultural heritage. The samurai, bound by the Bushido code of honor, would continue to embody the virtues of courage, loyalty, and discipline. The Mongol invasions, though ultimately unsuccessful, had a lasting impact on both the Japanese and the Mongol cultures. The samurai became legends, and the Mongols, though they failed in Japan, would continue to shape the world in their own way, leaving behind an empire that stretched across continents and changed the course of history forever. The clash between the Mongols and the samurai remains one of the most dramatic moments in history. Two warrior cultures, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, faced off in a battle for control over Japan. It was a conflict marked by strategy, ferocity, and, as we saw, the unpredictable power of nature. And in the end, it was the samurai who emerged victorious, thanks in part to their warrior spirit, but also to the mysterious force of the divine wind. History, as it often does, had the final say. So what do you think? Would the Mongols have won if not for the storms? Or was the samurai victory truly divine intervention? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.